Hey friends, what's up? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ein Gimel, Daf 73. Masechta Yevamos, friends. Daf Ein Gimel, the Maise, talks about Meiser Sheni, Bikurim, Trume, a little Kachim comes up, and Orals. Okay. We're going to start on Daf Ein Gimel with Aleph, 2 lines into the page, 3 lines on the beginning of the 3rd line of the page. Ba'ominim Rav Sheshes, the Taka Asa Kashaf and Rav Sheshes, Oral Mal B'Meiser. Can an oral, an uncircumcised fellow, eat Meiser Sheni? Who could tell me what Meiser Sheni is? Meiser Sheni, I mean, we all know what Meiser Sheni is, right? Like you have a field, you first take Truma, and then you take Meiser, and then you take Meiser Sheni. That's on years 1 and 2, 4 and 5 of the Shemitah cycle. So, Ba'omine Rav Sheshes Oral Ma Meiser. Can an oral eat Meiser Sheni, right? So, the halach with Meiser Sheni is that you schlep it to Yerushalayim and you eat it there. Can an oral eat Meiser Sheni? Ke'echid Yolav Pesach Mi Meiser. Do we say that just like we learn out Pesach from Meiser Sheni Linin Aninus regarding an onain, that just like an onain is prohibited from eating Meiser Sheni, so also an onain is prohibited from eating Korban Pesach. So Elefnami Meiser Mi Pesach Linin Arelis. So let's also say, well then it's reciprocal. Just like by Korban Pesach, an oral is forbidden from eating Korban Pesach. So then, by Meiser Sheni as well, an oral is going to be forbidden, or Dilma, or perhaps Chomer Mikal Yolif, Kal Michomer Lo Yolif. Saying, look, Korban Pesach is a more stringent case than Meiser Sheni, right? Korban Pesach, there's Choris, all sorts of other things. So it's more Kodshim, it's more stringent. So therefore, it makes sense to say that, yes, if an onain is prohibited from eating Meiser Sheni, so then an onain is also prohibited from eating Korban Pesach, which is more stringent. But if we say that, look, an oral is prohibited from eating Korban Pesach, does that necessarily mean that in Meiser Sheni, which is a more lenient case, an oral would be forbidden as well? So we don't know. So Omar Lehu Tenisuas, they say, well, look, we have Epis Mishnah, Trume Bikurim. So if we look at Trume, which is the first tithe that is given to the Kohen. Bikurim are when you have first fruits of the season, you take them to Yerushalayim and you give them to the Kohen. Chayav maleim misa. So if you eat them when you're tamei, so chayav misa bidei shamayim v'chomesh. If you eat them, right, if a zar eats trume or bikurim by accident, so then you're chayav to pay back the principal plus a fifth. Pasurin the zarim. Also, non-Kohanim are forbidden from eating these things. If a nichse kohen, they belong to the kohen. It could be makadosh, a woman with trume or bikurim. Ve'olin be'echod v'meo. And also, if you have truma or bikurim that gets mixed together with chulin, so you're gonna have 100 parts chulin to 1 part truma or bikurim in order for it to be bottle. V'tu'unin rechitza sadayim b'hayiv shemesh. And in order to eat truma and bikurim, you have to first wash your hands because stam yadayim ashniyosein. And if you are a tvul yom, you have to wait till the evening in order to chaperein. Hare elu b'truma of bikurim, and these stringencies are specifically by truma and by bikurim. Masha'en kein b'meiser, which is not the case by Meiser Sheni. So basically, we just listed a whole bunch of ways in which Truma and Bikurim are more stringent than Meiser Sheni. Vim Isa. Now, fact the Gemara, if it would be true that Meiser Sheni, an oral is prohibited from eating Meiser Sheni. No, is permitted to. If we would say that an oral is permitted to eat Meiser Sheni, well then Arelos should be listed on this list as well. Meaning, if we were just listing a whole bunch of ways in which Trume and Bikurim are more stringent than Meiser Sheni, well then, how about this? We know that an oral is forbidden from eating Trume. So then, if we would say that an oral is permitted to eat Meiser Sheni, well then that should be another example of how Trume is more stringent than Meiser Sheni, in that an Orel can eat Truma but cannot eat Meiser. No, the opposite. An Orel cannot eat Truma but can eat Meiser Sheni. V'im isa nisne Orel also boen. So if that was the case, then Orel should be on the list of ways in which Truma and Bikurim are more stringent than Meiser Sheni. Mashen came by Meiser, right? Whereas by Meiser it's permitted. So from the fact that it was not on the list, it sounds like with regard to Orel, they are the same. There is no difference. That just like an Orel is forbidden from eating Truma, so too an Orel is forbidden from eating Meiser Sheni. That is what we want to say. And for the Gemara Tana V'Shayr, the Gemara says not necessarily. Not necessarily. This was not a comprehensive list. This is not a comprehensive list. It could be that actually an Orel is forbidden from eating Truma but is permitted to eat Meiser Sheni. Then why wasn't Orel on the list? It's not a comprehensive list. Umay Shire, the high Shire. So now the Gemara says, well, not so fast. 1 second. What if it's not a comprehensive list? Well, then there must have been a few things that are not on the list. Okay, fine. So Orel didn't make the list. What else isn't on the list? If Orel is the only example of something that didn't make it on the list, well, then that's suspicious. Why should this be the only thing? They listed like a whole bunch of things. They left out one thing. It makes sense to say that it's not a comprehensive list if it left out a whole bunch of things. But if it's only Orel, well, then that's too conspicuous, right? If it's only Orel or too suspicious, right? Then I would definitely suspect that it's saying that Orelis would not be different, right? Meaning, if it was different, then it should be on the list. All right, what? Right, meaning the question was, why is it not on the list? It must be that there is no difference between, Truma and Meiser Sheni in this respect, and we say that, well, it's not a comprehensive list. So we want to know what else didn't make it onto the list in order to be able to buy that answer that it's not a comprehensive list. So, Shire Dika Tani Seifa. So the Gemara answers, well, if you continue in the Brisa or in the Mishnah, it says, Yesh b'maiser u'v'bikurim ma'she'en kein b'truma. Now there are characteristics of Meiser Sheni and Bikurim which are not relevant to Truma. She'amaiser v'abikurim te'unin havas makom, that both by Meiser Sheni and by Bikurim you have to bring them to Jerusalem. V'te'unin vidoy, and you have to say like Bi'arti HaKodesh Min HaBayis, and you say this whole thing on it. Ve'asurin la'onein, and an onein is not allowed to eat Meiser Sheni or Bikurim. Reb Shimon says that an onein can eat Bikurim. V'chayav beer, and also you have to, after 3 years, if you haven't brought if you didn't bring Meiser Sheni on the first year or the second year, so in the third year you have to bring it to Jerusalem by then. Reb Shimon Poter, Reb Shimon says that by Bikurim you don't have to necessarily do this biur. Ve'ilu also levayer made betuma ve'ochlim betumas atzman loke mashen kem betuma lo katani. And in the Seifa, right, so we're listing ways in which Meiser Sheni and Bikurim are more stringent than Truma, and we left out 2 examples. One example that was left out is that also levayer mein betumah, that if you have Meiser Sheni or Bikurim that become tameh, you cannot burn it, right? Truma tameh you could burn, right? You can use it as fuel. Not so when it comes to Meiser Sheni or Bikurim. V'ochlim betumas atzman loke, and also if somebody eats Meiser Sheni or Bikurim in a state of tumah, so we beat them up a shtickle. So, right, meaning if the Meiser Sheni or the Bikurim is tameh, so then and a fellow eats them, so then he gets malchus mashen kem b'truma, which is not the case by truma. So lo katani, those were not listed. So we see that in the Seifa we dafka leave out more than one thing. So we see that in these Mishnayos they are not comprehensive lists, right? In the first, you can argue that in the first Mishnah we left out Orel, in the second Mishnah they left out that you cannot burn Meiser Sheni, or you cannot get Hanoah by burning Meiser Sheni or Bikurim, as well as you chayiv malchus by eating Meiser Sheni and Bikurim if they're tameh, which is not the case by Truma. By Truma, you'll be chayiv misa b'dei shamayim if you eat it in the state of Tumah, but you won't be chayiv malchus. Al-Matani B'Shari, so we see that there are several things left out of these lists, and therefore we could argue that it's not a comprehensive list, and therefore potentially an Ariel would be unable to eat. Potentially, you could say that an Ariel would be able to eat Meiser Sheni, and it just wasn't on the list of ways in which Truma and Bikurim are more stringent because it was not a comprehensive list. All right. Omer Ma'ari, it said earlier, Vasurin La'onein, that Meiser Sheni is unable to be eaten by an Onein, a fellow who a relative passed away and has not yet been buried. Reb Shimon Matir, Reb Shimon says that Bikurim is permitted to be eaten by an Onein. Okay, Minalahu, how come the Tanakama says that Meiser Sheni is and Bikurim are also to an Onein? Tichsiv, as the pasuk says, Lo sucha lecho b'shorecha meiser degancha v'tzorecha v'gomer usumas yodecho. Well, because the pasuk says that you can't eat, outside of Jerusalem, meiser sheni, and it says usumas yodecha v'amar. We said trumas yodecha elu bikurim. That trumas yodecha is a reference to bikurim. So we see that the pasuk is talking about meiser sheni. It's talking about bikurim. Bezkash bikurim the meiser, and we compare Bikurim to Meiser Sheni, my Meiser also the Onin, just like Meiser Sheni cannot be eaten by an Onin, as the pasuk says, Lo achalti ba'oni mimenu, Av Bikurim also the Onin, so also Bikurim cannot be consumed by an Onin. Reb Shimon, Truma karinu rachmane, whereas Reb Shimon, who says that Bikurim can be eaten by an Onin, he says, well, right, we said that Bikurim is referred to as Truma Sedecha, so it's referred to as Truma. Ma Truma muteres la'onin, Av Bikurim muter la'onin. Just like Truma can be eaten by an Onein, so also Bikurim can be eaten by an Onein. The Bryce had also said, the Mishnah had also said that by Meiser Sheni and by Bikurim, you have to, at the end of 3 years, you have to bring them, make sure that if you didn't bring them to Yerushalayim in the prior 2 years, then you have to bring them now. Reb Shimon Poter, Reb Shimon says that by Bikurim, you do not need to do Bi'ur, Mar Makish or Mar Lamakish. Well, the Tanakamu says that you have to do biur by both, so he compares Meiser Sheni and Bikurim, whereas Reb Shimon does not compare them, and he says that even though by Meiser Sheni at the end of 3 years you have to get rid of it, that doesn't necessarily apply to Bikurim. But also the Vaymein Betuma. So we said that you're not allowed to burn Meiser Sheni or Bikurim when they are Tameh. And if you eat them either when you're tummy or when they're tummy, we'll see in a minute, you get malchus minolan. So how do we know that you're not allowed to burn Meiser Sheni or Bikurim that are tummy, right? When it comes to Truma, if you have Truma Tameh, you can use it as fuel. You could use it to burn, to make fire. But you cannot do that by Meiser Sheni or Bikurim. The Tanya we learn in the Bryce. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon lo bi'arti mimenu b'tameh. I did not burn it b'tameh ben shani tameh v'utar. Whether that means that I am tameh and the Meiser Sheni is taor, ben shani taor v'utameh, or whether I am taor or the Meiser Sheni is tameh. So we see that when it comes to Meiser Sheni, whether basically if there's tumah, either I'm tameh or the Meiser Sheni is tameh, you are not able to burn it. Okay, and where do we see, as we said earlier, that if you eat Meiser Sheni instead of when it's tameh, so you get malchus, and you're there. The Gemara says, I don't. The Brisa says, I do not know. To which the Gemara says, wait 1 second. If you are going to eat Meiser Sheni when you are in a state of tumah, you're going to get malchus. It's explicitly written in the Torah, right? It says explicitly, Nefesh Shatiga Bo, that anybody who touches Tumah, V'Tama Ada Arv, will become Tummy till the evening, V'Liocham and Akachim, and you cannot eat Meiser Sheni, Kimachas B'Sor B'Amoyim, unless you go to the mikvah. So we see that by Meiser Sheni, it says, Lo Yocham and Akachim, it says that you cannot eat it, and it's allowed. So of course you'll be Chayiv Malchus. So it says, right, so meaning, what do you mean you don't know where it comes from? We just saw a pasuk that says that, you're not allowed to eat Meiser Sheni when you're tummy. So this is what we're asking. Tumas atzmo minayin. How do we know that if the Meiser Sheni itself is tamei, then you'll be chayav malchus if you eat it? Well, the pasuk says that you're not allowed to eat outside of Jerusalem Meiser Dugancha, right? Meiser Sheni. And it also says that it says if you have a bechor, you have a firstborn animal, and the firstborn animal then gets a mum, so you could be poda it, and then and then you can slaughter it and eat it. So it says that you can eat it wherever you want. It doesn't have to be in Jerusalem. You can have Tomei people, Torah people, like a deer and a doe, maybe ayal, ram, ram. Isn't ayal a ram? Maybe. So Vitana Dvei Rabbi Shmuel, we start by the Bismillah of Rabbi Shmuel. Afilu Tamei V'Torah Ochlin Al Shulchan Echad B'Kara Achas. When it comes to this firstborn that was redeemed because it has a mum, so in that case you can eat it wherever you want, and you can even have Tamei people and Torah people together. And it's fine, right? It's okay to eat it even if it's in a state of tumah. To which the Gemara says, and we contrast these two, right? Meaning when it comes to Meiser Sheni, it says, Lo suchalecha b'shorecha, you cannot eat it wherever you want. And it says by a bechor that was redeemed, it says b'shorecha tochlen, you can eat it wherever you want, right? But Meiser Sheni, it has to be in Jerusalem, but by this bechor, it could be wherever you want. So, and just like we're saying that by bechor, you can also eat it regardless of if you're tamei or tahor, so that's specifically by bechor, but by Meiser Sheni, you would not be allowed to eat it if it is tamei. And if you do, you'll be chayav malchus. Alright? Masha'ein kein b'trume, which is not so when it comes to trume. So that when it comes to truma, you're not allowed to. No, I'm sorry. When it comes to Meiser Sheni, when it comes to bikurim, so then you're not allowed to burn it if it's tamei. But when it comes to truma, you are allowed to burn it. So minalan, how do you know that you're allowed to burn it? Amar Babo, Amar B'Yochanan, Amar Kra. That the pasuk says lo v'yarti mimenu b'tamei. That we say by Meiser Sheni that I did not burn it when it was tamei. Mimenu yatamavi aval atamavi shemen shel trume shenitma. Right? That we don't burn Meiser Sheni that becomes tamei. But if you have truma that became tamei, so then you would be able to burn that. Ve'ema mimenu yatamavir aval atamavir shemen shel kodesh shenitma. 1 second. Why are we assuming that we're saying that? Why are we saying that you're not allowed to burn Meiser Sheni, but you're allowed to burn truma? Maybe I'll say that you're not allowed to burn Meiser Sheni, that's tamei, but you're allowed to burn oil of kodesh, right? For example, if you're makdish oil, that you're making it, you consecrate oil, and then it becomes tamei. Maybe I'll say that you're allowed to burn that. So lav kavachomer. So we say, well, it's a kavachomer. Ma meiser akal amator lo biarti b'menu b'tamei kodesh chomer lo kol sheken. Right? Well, 1 second. If when it comes to meiser sheni, which is more lenient than something that's been consecrated, and we're saying that you're not allowed to eat Meiser Sheni in and we're saying that you're not allowed to burn Meiser Sheni that has become tamei. So certainly then you're not going to be able to burn oil, consecrated oil that became tamei. But then say the same thing by truma as well, that you shouldn't be allowed to burn truma that became tamei. So yeah, but the pasuk says that mimenu, from which we said that Meiser Sheni you don't burn, but truma you can burn. Umara Isa, how come we're saying that you are allowed to burn truma tamei, but you're not allowed to burn oil of kodesh that became tamei? So mistava kodesh lo mima itno. It makes sense to say that kodesh is the one that we'll be stringent on, and that we're going to say you're not allowed to burn if it becomes tamei. Shekain pankaakis. What is that? It's an acronym. Pigel, because by kodesh there's pigel, which means if you have like the wrong intentions of when you're planning to eat it, so then it becomes pigel, it becomes posel, right? No, sir. Also by kodshim, you have to eat it within a certain time. If you eat it outside of that time, so then it becomes no, sir. It's left over. You have to burn it. Korban, also it's referred to as a korban. Me'ila, right? That has to be in Yerushalayim. So Me'ila, also if you get benefit from Kodesh, so then you have to bring an Asher Me'ilos. Kares, and if you eat it, if it's eaten by like a non-Zara or somebody who's not allowed to eat it intentionally, so you chayiv Kares. V'asr la'onein, and also an onein is not allowed to partake in Kodesh. Adra b'truna lo mima'id. No, I'll say that truma is stringent. Shekain machpaz misa, that by truma, if you eat it, so you chayiv misa b'dei shamayim, right? If you eat it in a state of tumah. B'chomesh, if a non-Kohen eats it by accident, then he has to pay the principal plus a fifth. Ve'in la pidyon, and you can't redeem it. Basur lezarim, and non-Kohanim are forbidden from eating it. Hanoch nefishon. So the Gemara says, yeah, but still, kodshim is more stringent than truma because there are just more stringencies, right? We said, right, the first one had pigol, nosar, korban, me'ila, kares, asla onen, right? There were 6 examples, whereas this was only 4 by truma. V'baisema kares adifo. Or if you want, I'll say that, look, when it comes to hekdesh, when it comes to kodesh, if you eat it in a state of tumas, then you're going to be chayiv kares. Whereas when it comes to truma, it will be misa b'dei shamayim. Kares is more stringent, so we see that kodshim is a more stringent case. Alright, fine. So friends, that was daf Ayin Gimel of Masechta Yevamos. The daf started out with the question of, can an oral eat Meiser Sheni? We gave basically, 2 options, either yes or no. We didn't necessarily succeed in proving it either way, I think. And then we got into some differences between Meiser Sheni and Trume, Bikurim. Peace out.